Good evening and welcome to our hashtag We Connect webinar series. I am Dr. Jenna Woodland, the Superintendent of Evergreen Park School District 124. As always, I am humbled and honored to be here connecting with you as a community to ensure that we create transparency in our communication. We are recording these live and I love doing them live. And just a reminder, in the event you get disconnected from our technology related resources, please just click on the Zoom link that was shared with you earlier today. Dan Lee, our technology director, is supporting us from behind the scenes, and he'll be clicking us through our lovely PowerPoint today. And so Dan, if you can go ahead and click to the next slide. As a reminder, our hashtag We Connect webinar series is aligned to our goals to ensure that we're putting everything into action. Something that I heard directly from our staff as well as our community is to ensure that we're making our strategic plan come to life. As a reminder, we have 4 very specific goals tied to our strategic plan. They are culture, communications, curriculum and instruction, diversity, equity, and inclusion, student support services. Today, we will focus directly on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I have some very special guests with you today who took part in our Equity Action Planning Committee. So our first guest that I would like to introduce to you is Miss Haley Vermeer. So welcome, Miss Haley Vermeer. If you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself to our We Connect webinar group.
Hello, I am Haley Vermeer. I'm the principal at Southeast Elementaries. I'm in my second year as principal. Previously, I worked in Downers Grove and also in Chicago Public Schools. And for the purpose of tonight, I have been part of the Equity Action Team and specifically a strand leader with our family and community partnerships. So I'm excited to be here tonight.
Great. Thank you so much. We're happy to have you here. Haley, you had a very unique experience. I don't know if you remember when you interviewed for principal, you spoke about an experience that you had in which you directly tried to connect with your community. Would you mind sharing that story with everyone?
I don't know exactly which one you're talking about, Dr. Woodland, because I feel like part of what I think is really important is making connections amongst people and how much we can learn from one another. So one thing that I had the opportunity to do, and I don't know if this is the one I shared, but when I was after college, I did a year-long volunteer program on the west side of Chicago. And when I did that program, I got to know the students and kids in the neighborhood. And the program was really just to be a good neighbor to our neighbors and really to see kind of the injustices that our neighbors face day in and day out. And part of that process that I saw was that the students and kids within the neighborhood really had very minimal opportunities outside their neighborhood. So they went to school in their neighborhood, they went to church in the neighborhood, they went to the store, but often they hadn't even gone downtown Chicago, much less any other place outside of Illinois. And so I had worked in my college years, connected with a church in Alma, Michigan. And I thought to myself, how cool would it be if these kids had the opportunity to leave this neighborhood and to see another environment? Not only that, but also to, I had been connected with my church in Alma and we had run summer camps there. And also to empower them as leaders, to say that, you know, these students here on the west side of Chicago could be a leader within our community. How do we provide opportunities for that? And so we took these kids from the west side of Chicago for many years, probably 8 to 10 years, where we brought them to Michigan. They stayed with host families and just to see the power of how much they learn from one another. So not only did our students and our kids in the neighborhood just have these experiences that they've never had before, but also the families in Michigan had experiences that they've never had before. And I think to find just the power in when we kind of stretch ourselves in different ways that make us uncomfortable, how much we can learn from one another. And that really is kind of the basis of this work as well. I hope that was a story. Was that the story I shared?
That was exactly the story I was looking for. This concept of connecting with community and ensuring that we're creating an inclusive environment. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem.
And our next guest, we have Miss Nilda Ramirez. So hi, Nilda. I'm so happy you're here today. Nilda is a parent and also a member of our D124 Foundation. So Nilda, if you would feel free to introduce yourself to our hashtag We Connect.
Hi, I'm Nilda Ramirez. I'm a parent of two boys that are at Northeast, and I have been in Evergreen Park for 9 years.
Very good. Very good. And why is this work so important to you?
Because I'm raising my kids in this community, and I don't want to see the community or the schools deteriorate because we don't have an understanding of one another based on differences in our cultures.
Very good. Thank you so much. We're excited to have you here.
Thank you.
And Miss Lara, how are you? Miss Lara, she is the president of our BPAC Association. She does so much volunteer work that we're so appreciative of. So I'm so happy to have you here tonight again, volunteering your time. So if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself to our hashtag We Connect community.
I have three children, and I have one that's a first grader at Northeast, and then our middle child is getting ready to go to kindergarten next year at Northeast too. So I'll have two in school at Northeast. But we've lived here for 5 years, and I'm originally from Wisconsin. So my husband is from Chicago, though.
That's awesome. And why are you so passionate about this work?
I think for me, it's a big deal because my husband is Hispanic and I'm not. And so when we talk about the ways that we grew up and the way that school was for us, we had very different experiences. And so it's important for me to have the positives from his experiences and the positives from my experiences be a part of my children's schooling. And I'm a very firm believer in being the change that you want. Instead of you have to get involved in order to make change, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the first time I've had parents on this committee. So I am so glad that you're here, and being able to speak on behalf of our community is just a huge part of what we do. So thank you so much. Right. If you want to go ahead and click to the next slide, Mr. Lee. So a part of what we have done as a school district is we have gone down the road of a strategic plan, which I continue to talk about. And our strategic plan had a variety of different branches, but of course, one of them is this concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one of the most important things that we do in a school district for kids is to create an inclusive environment for all. And I think a lot of times when we think about equity work, we automatically think about race. However, today it's really our goal to share what those different strands look like in detail. So you can think about how can this really translate to what my child experiences on a day in and day out basis. So the goals that our strategic plan really aligned to was to create an equity belief statement, which I will share with you today. We want to demonstrate the cultural responsiveness with supporting our families. We want to view behavior in a culturally responsive manner. The district will review and establish hiring and retention practices as it's relating to diversifying our staff. And I'm so happy that we officially have an HR department here at D124, and we're doing a lot of work around those needs. And the district shall review materials and resources that represent the diverse needs of our students in order to create an inclusive environment for all. So now I'm going to actually have Ms. Haley Vermeer, our principal, who led out one of our strands, talk about the equity action planning that we completed as a committee. This committee was comprised, just so you're aware of teachers, because of course we need our teachers to really support in moving us forward, as well as community members and administrators. And we did also have 2 board members that were present on this committee.
Yeah, so Dan, you can jump to the next slide. We worked with Dr. Yvette Dubiel, who really led us, our equity action team, in this work. And really, the equity action plan that was approved by the board in December really outlines our overall work to be inclusive and supportive, and empower our students and staff and all of our stakeholders in this work. And so when she helped us kind of organize our work, there were 5 main strands that kind of held all of our objectives and our goals amongst this work. So the first one being systems, the second one being teaching and learning, the third one being student voice, climate, and culture, the fourth being professional learning, and then finally the last one being family and community as agency. So each of these strands had strand leaders. I was the strand leader for family and community as agency. And then we each had within our strand, we had, like Jenna said, community members, staff members that made up kind of the committee within that strand. And so each strand had specific objectives that we're working through as part of this equity action plan. So the next thing we're going to do is kind of go through each strand and talk a little bit about those objectives and kind of where we are in terms of the progress that we're making on those objectives.
Okay, so I happen to be the facilitator of the systems strand. And one of the main goals of this strand was to create a definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think a lot of times when we talk through different concepts in education, there are so many acronyms and there are so many confusing terms. And what we determined is that we needed to make these concepts really transparent again to our community as well as to our teachers, so everyone had a common understanding of what they meant, so that we could create then our professional learning systems around these concepts. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, I'm actually going to read them to you so you have an understanding. So the definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So as an Evergreen Park school community, our strength is the unique perspective of all community members, staff, and students. We value the perspective of all individuals and share in a common understanding of belonging. As a district, we aim to uphold the goals of our strategic plan in alignment with our actions, policies, and procedures. It is our obligation and commitment to uphold and embrace the following definitions. Diversity is the existence of many identities, backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives within a community. I want to also speak to the fact that we received feedback from not just the committee members, but also feedback from our student population, as obviously student voice is clearly an important process of making decisions when we're trying to define what this work should look like and sound like. And so I was lucky enough to have a seventh grade teacher who sat on my systems committee who brought this to a group of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students to allow for their feedback as well. All right, Dan. Equity. A little cut off here, so let me try and fix this a little bit. Okay. In life, advantages and disadvantages exist. As a result, individuals do not begin their journey in the same place. Equity provides an environment of fairness where each individual has what they need to meet their full potential. I feel the need to ask if anyone would be willing to comment about why they think this definition is so important to some of the work that we have been doing so far, or an example that you've seen. Don't be shy. Come
No,
on.
we just know that. I mean, I think we just know that our students come from many, many different backgrounds and family situations, and just have different needs for each student within our building. And so I think as a principal within a school, I'm always trying to think of how do I meet the needs of each learner within my building? And also understanding that that looks totally different from one student to the next.
Right.
And so I think when we think of this work, how do we ensure that we are providing those resources for every student, no matter where they are, to be successful?
Yeah. I mean, I was going to give too like a really simplistic example of equity. So say you have a classroom of kindergarten students who come in, and some students have preschool and some students don't. And it's no one's fault, right? Preschool is not a requirement. No one has to go to preschool. Or say, for example, you have a child who goes to half-day daycare and a child who goes to full-day daycare. But then you put all students in a classroom together, and the child who might have had exposure to peer interactions, and then there's another student who didn't have exposure to peer interactions. And now we're asking them all to get along together in a kindergarten classroom, right? And so there might be natural inequities, not for anyone's fault or any reason, but the child who might not have had more social exposure might need additional social exposure in that kindergarten setting in order to create access for all. So it's like a very simple example, but ensuring that we create an environment where all students get what they need to be successful. Would anyone else like to comment on that? I'm going to get Meg and Nilda to talk by the end, I promise. All right, so we are going to go to our next slide about inclusion. I think this is kind of where the rubber meets the road, right, Haley? So inclusion refers to an environment where all individuals are and feel respected, have a sense of belonging, and participate and achieve their potential. While diversity is essential, it is not sufficient. An institution can be both diverse and non-inclusive at the same time. A commitment to an environment of inclusive practices is critical to the success of all that belong. So we have these great intentions of really bringing some of our inclusion work into our professional learning next year with our teachers, as there's such critical need to ensure that every single student that walks through our buildings feels as though they belong in their environment. And that's so important to everything that we do. Any thoughts, comments?
I mean, I think that we already, have begun that work with our teachers this year with professional learning that we're going to talk about in just a minute. But I think just as you read that to me, I'm like, yes, like this is where we want to go. We want everyone to feel like they belong and that they're part of our schools, and that no matter who they are or where they come from, that they matter as who they are as individuals.
Great.
I think it's very important. My sister has cerebral palsy and she went to a private school that didn't have special needs or like the teachers didn't have, there was no class for her basically. And so she got sat in the back and they kind of like got to her when they could. And then my mom did most of like the schooling part of it.
Yeah.
And I can see how it's like affected her even as an adult, and how I think it's so important that everyone does feel included no matter how we do it. I think it's very important, and these are really important, especially when they're really young. Like that's when they're forming their personalities and how their self-worth and all of those kind of things that people sometimes think that like maybe happen later on. But I think what really happens right now and later on is when you have to like overcome whatever happened in grade school. So it's really great that you guys are doing this work and having everyone feel included no matter where they're coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, I think that's a great point with special education and ensuring that students have access to their least restrictive environment. And so one of our main goals with special education is always ensuring that students have exposure to their gen ed peers every single day. And I know we had another parent who was on our strategic planning committee who really advocated for that need. And it's because we do want our students to have that exposure every day and to ensure that we provide those opportunities regularly.
I think it applies to parents as well. Like, I have personally never felt pushed away by anyone. Like I've been able to email my kids' teachers. I've been able to email the principal, the assistant principal. I've emailed you, Dr. Woodland. And I've always felt like it's okay to come and ask questions and get the response that I need. So I think it's also important for parents to know that it's okay, that they are included in whatever's going on in the school. And it's okay for them to like reach out.
Yeah, I love that. We want our parents to feel included in the decision-making process. Absolutely. Right. So some next steps that we have related to our systems group is we want to continue to create a glossary of terms, and that glossary of terms will also be present on our website. And then we do have the intention of adopting a board policy that's tied to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And when I think of that work, that demonstrates to me how important our teachers see this work, our community see this work, and our Board of Education sees this work, is that we have clear alignment from our goals to our policies to our procedures all the way down to our classroom setting. So that is what we're aiming for from start to finish. So be on the lookout for that in the near horizon. All right, Haley, Dan, if you want to go ahead and switch
Yeah,
to
Dan, you can jump to the
Okay.
next slide. So teaching and learning, sorry, jump right in, is our second strand. And really, when we think about teaching and learning, we're really ensuring that our curriculum, our resources, our instructional approaches, our assessments, our programming are not only equity-driven pedagogy, but also advance equity for all students. So that really is the goal with the teaching and learning strand. And there are really two major objectives within that strand. One being, and this is really the work of this year, was to create and pilot a culturally responsive curriculum review process. So we've piloted ELA curriculums in both our elementary and our middle schools, leading to a recommendation for a new ELA curriculum for next year. And part of that process was for us to do this culturally responsive curriculum review. So we used a rubric, and we part of that was like surveying students and saying, like, did you relate to the unit that we were learning? And did you learn something new about someone else in this unit? Or how has like this unit of study kind of changed your view on maybe like a misconception you had of somebody? And so we're looking at having this review process with our curriculum. And so we were piloting that year, this year, as we looked through our different ELA pilots, and we're going to continue to kind of revise that process throughout the end of this year, and then use that again next year with our other curriculums. And so really that second objective is to evaluate all of our district curriculums for inclusivity, to ensure a representation of all of our students. Again, we want our students to feel like they're represented within our curriculum. And that may mean that we need to have some additional resources that go with a curriculum. And so that culturally responsive tool is going to help us kind of gauge where we are and what we need in addition to really kind of meet the needs of our students, and for them to feel like they belong and that they're part of this curriculum process.
I think that's a great
Anything to
example.
add?
No, I really think that there's really two portions of this, and that's we want to ensure that teachers understand what culturally responsive pedagogy looks like and sounds like in a classroom setting, and that will come along with our professional development in the future. And that when we review all of our curriculum resources, that again, it reflects our student body. And I think sometimes, especially when we get to the teaching and learning strand, there are some misconceptions about what we are teaching and what we're not teaching. And I think this is an opportunity to really say, like, we are teaching grade level standards because that's what we're obligated to teach. And what we're really looking for is for the products that we put in front of our kids, is that it reflects our student body on a day in and day out basis, so they feel valued and appreciated for their background, and that they can really advocate for their culture in the work that they do each day. So it's a big goal, but we're excited for that work. All right, Dan, if you want to go ahead and switch to the next slide. Okay, so student voice, climate, and culture. I mean, I even think about this concept of even from our littlest learners all the way up to our 8th grade students. I most recently had an interaction with a student, and she said, I really want strawberry milk. And I know it sounds so simple, but our kids, like, the environment in which they come to school in matters, and we want to make sure that they're a part of this process. And it's because if they feel valued and included every day, that they're allowed to be more productive in their learning environment. And so the whole goal of this portion of this strand is to really ensure that students feel a part of their environment and are able to contribute in a safe way that allows for systems change. And so a couple big picture topics is to promote a culture of inclusion and belonging through school displays, morning announcements. And then we intend to form and sustain a student equity leadership group. And in the main portion of that is we really have students who want to be leaders. And in fact, we have an article that's going out in our prospective newspaper about a group of our Northeast students who just recently put together a student voice committee on how they want to see change in their building. And they had such great ways in which they want to improve their school culture and climate. And we want to continue to capitalize on their voice. So I'm excited about those next steps, and especially that article that will be in the newspaper in the near future. Right, and our next is all about professional learning, one of our favorite topics, right, Haley?
Yeah, so one of kind of a huge, obviously one of the 5 major strands is professional learning. And really, when we think about professional learning, the way I think about it is that it's really a journey, right? We're all in different places in this journey of learning about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We all have different backgrounds, and that all kind of contributes to kind of where we are today. And so, we've really this year with our staff had ongoing professional development to have common language around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we've had sessions during our PLC time with Dr. Dubiel, where she has led different kind of Zoom sessions with us that is like reflective in terms of and educational. So some of those have been like Equity 101, just an overview. We've talked about implicit biases, and we've talked about microaggressions, modern day isms. And so within each of those professional development opportunities, she's kind of given us some background knowledge and kind of led us kind of in this journey of reflection. And so there's also been time where staff members have gone to breakout rooms and kind of discussed on, you know, how they kind of view different things or kind of their background on things. And so it really has kind of been I would say, building blocks of this work and the beginning of it. And so within this strand is also a commitment to ongoing learning. And so next year, I know that for principals, we'll have continued professional development that really relates to like, what does this look like for our teachers within our classrooms, and how can we support it as principals? And then the second kind of major objective within this is the onboarding process. So when we hire our new staff, do they have kind of the resources that they need to kind of build that foundation for this work as well? And so that's something as we go into next year and we, you know, are working on building those days out in August where we have our new staff come. How are we including this learning as part of that onboarding process? I think the biggest part, as you know, as a principal within the district, is understanding that we're all in different places on this journey and being supportive of that. And so having conversations with teachers, being available, having opportunities where we're discussing, where we might be looking at data and do we see data different amongst different, you know, students, or looking at behavior data as well. And so there's many different ways that this kind of plays out within a school. And I think just kind of being more aware and being more reflective in really everything that we do is like our step in the journey thus far.
Yes, absolutely.
And then Dan, this really is our strand. Why we're here tonight is family and community as partnership. So I'm really super thankful for Meg and Nilda for their commitment to be on our like strand this year and this ongoing work. And we also have other parents on that group as well. And if you're listening tonight and you're saying, hey, I want to do this work and I care about this as well, you're welcome to reach out. We'd love to have you because really we had 2 objectives. One, to create a community advisory team. So to really have a team of parents and community members that care about this work, that want to kind of bridge community and parent partnerships with the work of the district and provide feedback. And the first way we were able to do that was with a listening session that we're going to talk about in just a minute. And so we were able to host a listening session, but we're still kind of creating that advisory team. So if you're listening tonight, you want to be a part of it, please just reach out. We'd love to have you. Even if you have questions and you're not sure, again, we could talk through it. And then the second thing that we really wanted to focus on is this educational piece for parents and really partnering with parents around DEI work and also just resources within the community. So again, understanding that our families come from many different backgrounds. And so how can we be supportive of our families in different ways? We're actually hosting our first parent meeting coming up in May, which we're super excited about. We're going to talk about at the end tonight. We've connected with the Center for Self-Actualization and the library in terms of providing some resources to our parents. And a huge part that our Meg and Nilda will agree with is that we want to make this as easy as possible to parents to come out and be a part of things. And so we are providing childcare. We also will be translating for parents who need translation services. And so we're hoping that we can just continue to host. Our goal is to have quarterly parent meetings next year and host them at the different schools. So our first one will be at Southeast that we'll talk about in just a minute. But really, we'd love to get you, families and community, to partner with us in this work. We know that we just know we can't do it alone, right? We know that we need you, and that you play such a huge part in this work. And so we'd love to have you participate either in the parent meetings or kind of join our strand.
Great. Okay, so now I want to get to the fun stuff. I really want to talk to Meg and Nilda. Are you ready, ladies? How are we doing? You know, as Haley said, you know, the most important thing that we do is to really partner with our parents to ensure that we create an environment where not just our kids feel included, but also, as Nilda said, that our parents feel included in the decision-making process. So again, I just kind of want to say, like, you are both a part of this equity action planning. So I just want to hear from you. Can you just talk about your experience on the equity action planning, why it was important to you, again, what you learned, any takeaways that you had? I would love to hear from you.
It was really nice seeing like admin and teachers and parents and even board members like all working together. It was really I don't want to say surprised because that sounds weird, but I was glad to see that like everyone in the group wanted to actually create inclusion, even if they didn't completely understand what that meant, like what equity meant for different people. One of the things, I think one of the earlier sessions, we were given a homework to like read articles or watch TED Talk. In the following session, we sat down and we talked about it, and it was our experiences, sharing our experiences with one another. It was pretty cool just to see how different, even though we're all in the same community, how different we all are.
Yeah. And then it's really about perspective, right, Nelda? Like, we all have our own perspective. And if we really are able to have open, honest conversations with one another, we can really learn a lot. And I feel like even every time I went to those committee meetings, like, I personally took, something away from somebody that I didn't know. And, you become a better person by having those conversations and being able to learn together. So thank you. I appreciate that. What about you, Meg?
I really enjoyed our meetings as well. It was kind of like what Nilda was saying, it was nice to have everybody together. And so you did feel included, because I didn't go to a public school until I was in college. And so a lot of stuff that I feel like even when I started going to board meetings, I was like, what in the heck are they talking about? Like, it was very intimidated by I didn't know the lingo. And I thought, I don't really know what I'm going to bring to the table here, because I don't have a background in education either. So I was like, I'm not really sure how this is going to go. But it was really nice. And I didn't feel out of place. I felt like this is our strand, this is what we're going to do. And it was perfect because it was connecting parents to the education process and explaining to them what are we doing? What does this mean? And so it was a little intimidating at first, and I'm glad that I did it though. And it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be.
Great.
So
Great.
that was good.
So I would love to also hear from your perspective, how do we continue to ensure that we get community involvement? Because that's super important to me and my team, is that we continue to use our parents as resources so that we can learn from them in terms of not just this work, but all the work that we do together.
I think making it as easy as possible. Just like things like this, like a webinar, something that you can watch later on your phone when your kids are asleep, or just making things like very accessible, or like we're going to have the meetings, but there's going to be childcare. Like that's a big thing. Like I won't go to things if I don't know, like if my husband's still working, I'm like, well, I have no one to watch the kids, so I can't be like running around with these kids. I might as well just stay home. So I think that is what's going to make it sustainable, as long as we can make it easy for parents to do.
Yeah, accessible for sure. Nilda, anything you'd like to add?
Oh, I agree with Meg. Like my husband had to be at home with my kids in order for me to come. So
Right.
during our first one back in January, was it? Like
Yeah.
we had childcare, but luckily my husband was at home. So I always have to have like either my babysitter to come, which she's awesome, or my husband to be home to be able to come to any of the meetings.
Right. Well, that's a great point. Accessibility and ensuring that we have child support for our families. I love it. And then where would you both like to see this work in the future? We all know everything that we do is a journey. Besides dual language, Meg, what else would you like to see?
Um, I think if we can include as many different cultures and people as possible,
Yeah.
I think that would be really great, because then it's sustainable. Because you're going to have, your community changes. It will always change, and you won't have the same groups of people in Evergreen Park forever. So I think if we have representation from lots of different groups, it not only helps our students and our staff go out in the world and interact with other people, but it also makes it so that we're ready for whoever is going to come into our neighborhood.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's so important. What do you think, Nilda?
I definitely want to see, like, I would love to see more parents' involvement, like a big group of people coming to our quarterly meetings.
Yeah.
Just so like Meg said, just so we can come to an understanding, get to know each other a little bit better, because our children are like direct recipients of our decisions, either the district, schools decisions, or even parents and guardians decisions. So they're going to behave whatever way that in the home they behave, and then they're going to bring it back in school. So if we as parents can just come get together and understand each other, then maybe we can see that we're not, although we have differences, we're not so different. We all just want the best for our children. So I would love to see a more unified like parents within the quadrants, like not just one quadrant, but like all four quadrants, like get to know parents from different quadrants. And
Yeah,
hopefully that can happen with the quarterly meetings.
I love that. Yeah, and that we're all working together towards one goal, right? And our goal is our kids, and that we're all here for the same reason. And it is really just understanding each other's perspective, and we all carry the weight of our perspective, right? And we're all passionate about it, and it's all important to us. But how do we come to a common consensus together? And I think both of you really represent that work, which I really appreciate so much. So thank you so much. Okay. So I would love to hear, I was at the listening tour, but no, everyone hears me talk all the time. So I would love to hear from all of you about what was the goal of the listening tour? And then what were some of your key takeaways that you had? So Haley, if you want to just kind of describe the listening tour, what the goal was, and then maybe Nilda and Meg can talk about some of the takeaways that they noticed.
So is anyone else, Mr. Lee, my is like really zoomed in for me, so I can't see the whole slide. Is that anyone else, or is it just me?
I'm
You
doing
guys, is it zoomed in for you guys or no?
Mine is good.
What happened? I didn't touch anything. Okay, so anyway, I can't see this whole slide. So, but I do like part of our work really was just trying to hear like where are people within the community. We know that so we just had some guided questions and we just listened. Really, the purpose was listening. Let's take notes. Let's hear kind of like where we're at to start with. And so we kind of asked like, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses, opportunities for growth? And you guys can see the slide and I can't. So what was the other one? Was it like strength, weaknesses, opportunities for growth, and maybe like threats to this work. And so we each of us kind of we're in a different little area, and we asked that question, and we asked a specific question. We just took notes on what we heard from the people that came. And so we were really grateful to have different parents from different schools, some staff members, some district level administrators, and we just kind of listened. And so the purpose was just to listen. And then I think when we listened, we found out that we needed to communicate a little better on some things. And so there was some curriculum questions of, you know, where there was Mr. Lee's here to try to help me maybe see this whole slide that I can't see. But there were questions amongst curriculum about like social and emotional learning and sex education and critical race theory. And so those things that, you know, we hear in the news were brought up, and we were able to kind of just clarify of, you know, that isn't how we didn't adopt the sex education curriculum within our district. And when we talk about this work, we're really talking about how are we inclusive with our students? How do we help students see the differences in one another and accept people for being different? And so we're not talking about how one race is superior to another. And so it really was helpful in terms of Mr. Lee tried to help me, and I still can't see the slide, but that's fine. But we really, I think, just talked and listened. No, I'm fine. And saw that there also was just like inconsistencies between schools. And so Northeast, like we heard of the different celebrations that they do at Northeast, which look different from where I am at Southeast, which look different from Southwest. And so, you know, different, trying to see like, can we be more consistent in how we celebrate, you know, cultural celebrations within our school. And so it was kind of just an eye-opening experience that I think allowed us to kind of say, okay, well, we need to either communicate better in this area, or we need to provide more opportunities in this area, or a parent educational meeting in this area. But it was our first kind of just like, you know, I think just like reaching out to the community to kind of see where we're at as like, okay, let's build on this and go from here. And so you'll see some of our key takeaways there. I don't know, Megan, Nilda, if you have other things to add from your experience within the listening tour.
That's pretty much it. A big point was lack of or a perceived lack of communication. So that was
That's
a point that we took away. So yeah, it was. I mean, other than that, I think it went really well because we got to ask like parents like myself, like what their concerns were, and we were able to clarify, or not me specifically, but clarification was able to be put out there on what specifically like children are learning in school.
Right, absolutely. Meg, anything you'd like to add from that?
I actually wasn't there.
Okay, no worries.
I had Spanish club. I was teaching
Wow.
Spanish club
Oh,
that
that's
day.
right. You were teaching Spanish club. Well,
Yeah.
what I can say too, from my experience, I definitely agree in that, you know, sometimes I think you believe as a school district that you communicate well, but what I've continued to learn is that the more we communicate about what we are doing and what we're not doing, the better off we'll all be. And so this was, again, just another opportunity to share some of those misconceptions, answer any questions that parents have, and really try to ensure that, you know, we're trying to do what's best for children every single day. And I think it was a fabulous meeting. I think it was well structured. I was glad to see parents that were willing to come up and, you know, demonstrate what their questions are. And I really hope in the future that we'll continue with these ongoing parent meetings to provide that opportunity to our community even more so.
And I think part of that, like, is just having that safe space where like you allowing people to come from any background that they had to kind of share where they're at. And I think that that's where we have to start. And that was a key to kind of our equity action planning, was creating that space with each other. And also has been kind of a key to like our work within our schools, is for people to feel like they have a safe place to work through this work. And so I think that that's something that we have been kind of committed to all along.
My gosh. Okay, so I have to tell everyone. I just received a text message from somebody that I used to work with, that one of my students he was a special education student. He's going to be on Channel 5 News soon. I
For what?
still, I don't know, but I still keep in touch with him and his family. So I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. But that just demonstrates, right? All of this work is so important, right?
Yeah.
Because I had him in my class. So my day. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and switch to the next slide. Wait, where's your slide about your community work? Is that after questions?
About our meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, so I put that at, sorry, I moved that to the end as like
Okay,
the
no worries.
final, like you're invited to.
All right,
Yeah.
perfect. All right, so we are ready to engage in some additional questions, and we did receive a question from a community member too, which is fabulous. As a reminder, if any community members are watching, we will answer your questions right on the spot. And so I'm actually going to start with that question. A community member asked, what does inclusive learning look like really at the school level? And so right before this session, we kind of started to brainstorm what that can look like. And Meg actually gave a really great answer. So I'm going to turn it over to her, an example that she just experienced last week.
Yeah, so last week they usually, PBIS has like a social at the end. So PBIS is like the behavioral thing that they have in place at the school. So basically all of the younger grades, they get to participate since they don't really quite understand about the whole like consequences. But the older kids, they do. So basically, if they don't have infractions or if they've behaved well, then they get to participate. And so they usually do like an ice cream social. And this past time we did a paleta, which is like a Mexican popsicle. So we had one at Northeast, and then last week we had one at Northwest. And it was really cool because they had it in the gym. So at Northeast, we went to and that was the first one. So we went to every classroom. And at Northwest, they had everybody come into the gym. So they did they did two shifts. So the younger kids and then the older kids. And so we have like Hispanic music playing. Well, everyone came up and they had to say like thank you in Spanish for their popsicle, but it was really nice. You could tell which families listened to this music at home because kids were coming up and asking for song requests, and
Yes.
and like the kids were like teaching the other students like how to dance to this music. And so it was cool. And there was there were two teachers that were dancing. And so I think that was really fun too. Just to you could see that they were like, this is my element. Like, this is what I do at home. So it was
Yeah.
really
And I really love that story too, because it's really about students sharing their background with other students. And I think that's really what we're aiming at, is that every student has that opportunity to share their cultural background, and or not just their cultural background, but really ensuring again that we create an environment of inclusivity. I wanted to give just a quick example of something that we're doing at Central Middle School. So currently we're diving deep into school improvement processes, and we're working with teachers. And in the near future, we're going to be sharing out a parent survey. But of course, a part of this student voice piece is ensuring that when we're looking at school improvement planning, that we survey our students to ensure that we get their voice again in the decision-making process, because our kids can really make effective change, and their perspective is super important. And so what I've even learned this year is the more that we can include the student voice piece in our decisions, again, tied to our strategic plan, tied to a strand of our equity work, the more that we can create an environment where everyone feels as though they are included. So thank you so much for sharing that. So we're going to go to our next other question. So we kind of just talked about this, but Haley, if you want to speak a little bit more too to how are we celebrating diversity, equity, and inclusion within our schools currently?
Yeah, I love that example that Meg just gave, but also, I mean, I think that morning announcements, bulletin boards celebrating like Hispanic Heritage Month or Black History Month. We highlight certain books by authors. Like I'm thinking around like MLK Day, we had our teachers and our librarians share different books about Martin Luther King Jr. We also have cultural celebrations, and we're able to celebrate different holidays throughout the year. And so I will say that that is an area that we want to have more consistency. I think each school does it a little bit differently, which I think is okay. But in terms of just having a little bit more consistency to make sure that I think every student at every school does feel like they're celebrated throughout the year. And so that definitely is a work in progress.
No, absolutely. And, I always feel like you learn from other districts too. And like most recently, I saw another district who had a calendar of all of their holidays in which they acknowledge and celebrate together. And I would love to get to a place in a space where it is very cohesive and consistent and everyone knows and understands what we're looking to celebrate. And I think a lot of times there's certain things that are on the forefront of our mind, but even most recently, April is Autism Awareness Month. And I said, to my principals, like, what are we doing for Autism Awareness Month? And just really having those topics on the forefront of our mind so they're not an afterthought. And, it's definitely a next step for us, which I'm excited for.
I love that idea of a calendar.
I
Yes.
would love that because sometimes it's like a blessing that my kids don't speak English. Because sometimes when we see children that are different, that are physically different, my kids are very bad about being like, look at that. And I'm always like, okay, now how do we talk about this?
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's hard to find books or, anything to kind of like bridge that gap. And like, for example, autism, I don't know that much about it. So it's
Sure.
hard for me to then share with my child, like what what they should know. So having that at school would be so great so that like when we do run into people like that, they have seen it at school and then it's not quite like I don't know, it would just be like a parent helpful thing for me.
Yeah, I think that also could go along with the parent meetings that we want to host. Like how can we help educate our students about the diverse needs of people around us? Like could be a topic.
That'd be great.
All right, Dan, next question. Okay, Haley, so how are we addressing the needs of diversity, equity, and inclusion with our teachers?
So we've really dug in this year with that ongoing professional learning during our PLC time to have that common language around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really to kind of create that safe space. And so the way I see it with our teachers is just to continue to have reflective conversations about what this looks like within our classroom. I think when we look at data around discipline, just being aware of how we're referring different students for different behaviors, reflection on like student and parent surveys. And so like asking students, do you feel like you belong within our classroom? Do you feel like that I, as your teacher, know your cultural identity and what's important to you? And so I think providing opportunities within the classroom and supporting teachers and opportunities for students to have a voice within the classroom and to share kind of where they're at with how they feel within the school and within the classroom. And then I think too, like, just continuing the journey of listening to teachers and being available, I think, as an administrator, of knowing that we're all in different places on this journey and just being able to have intentional conversations that, help us to learn and grow and to become more inclusive of our students and our parents and those around us.
I love this. Partly like for all things, but one of the things that we were worried about putting our child in TBE was that we were like, okay, he's going to be separated. He's not going to speak English like quickly. And so is he going to get bullied at school? Because that's the experience that my husband had, that he got bullied. And
Sure.
so, and then when they merged, like they were like the weird Spanish speaking kids. And so even in a group where they were mainly Hispanics, like he got bullied. And so I love that, like I haven't seen that at Northeast. I love that like that we do the cultural things and like the teachers know about the cultural things. And I know that another thing that I love about it too is that you may have a child in your classroom that you don't have access to their culture. You know the people you know. Like my family is all white, and like I have one cousin that is African American. She's mixed, but I'm not like close with that side of her family. So
Sure.
you just don't always have access to those cultures, and that doesn't mean that your teacher won't have interactions with those kids. So it's really great for them to have this kind of like training or even just like knowledge to like this is what this culture does, because they are going to have kids in their classrooms from cultures that they may not have access to.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and it's all about our experiences that we have, what we've been exposed to and what we might not have been exposed to. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. It just has to do with our upbringing and what it looks like and how it could look different. And uh, definitely a step in the right direction. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, and our last question. So where do we hope to see this work in 3 years? That's something I always ask all of my guests. So I mean, it's the process of continuous improvement, and everything we do in a school district is a journey. And I always ask for grace, right? Because when you're trying to put big picture systems into place and really looking for effective change, um, I just like to think about though, like what's our end game? Like where do we really want to see this work long term? So I'd love to hear from all of you.
I'd like to see a more even playing field for like my children and their peers. And I'm hoping that the emphasis on diversity, equity, and inclusion will help with more positive behavior and like enhance like academic success. Because I think, especially with our strands, right? The family and community connections, like if we're able to, like the next one is going to be with the Center of Self-Actualization, right? Sometimes I do need help, like with calming down. We had an event at Northeast, and the speaker was talking about how we can calm down and like breaths of like a square. So like my husband and I use that because we both runs. Like we both yeah, we
Mhm.
use that. We're like, hey, let's take our deep breaths. And it helps, sometimes like I as a parent, I'm not as aware that if I'm like I'm in a bad mood in the morning, that my child's gonna go to school and he's gonna be in a bad mood. So that doesn't put him in the right playing field to like be fine at school. So even the smallest things, well, maybe not small, but even things helping parents or connecting us to resources in the community that we may not be aware of will help even out the playing field, and hopefully that'll positively affect the students.
Absolutely. Equity and access, right? Absolutely. Okay.
I think
My,
oh, sorry.
okay,
I,
go ahead.
I was gonna jump right in. I mean, I think that like when I think about 3 years from now, that really that this work is kind of ingrained in all of our systems, our policies and procedures. And I think right now, like we're seeing how it's ingrained in things and we're like, oh, taking notice of things. But getting to a place where like it's been acknowledged and we put systems in place to support being diverse, having students feel like they're included in everything that we do. And so I think part of that is really, accomplishing this equity action plan and really hearing, student voice being valued, heard, and represented, teachers feeling like they have safe places to continue to learn and grow and kind of share where they're at on this journey. I think like I would love our parent partnership, team to be functioning well and have these ongoing parent meetings to kind of support and kind of bring things together. I'm really excited about the work that we've already done, but I also feel like we have a lot of work to do. And so I'm excited to see like where we are in 3 years. I think there's so much growth that could happen. And I think that we are ready for it. And so I think just being committed to this work.
Great. Maya, anything you'd like to add?
I guess in 3 years, I just would love for there to be a constant a constant introduction of different cultures and different people, so that no matter who is coming into our schools, instead of the kids being like, oh, this is weird and different, being more like, oh, this is another person, because it's so like a part of their life in
Yep.
school to be like, everyone's different, everyone, and it's okay. And this group is this group, and this group is like, so that there would just be representation in all of the cultures around the world, around all the people that have, like disabilities, non-disabilities, like all of those sort of things, so that when they do encounter new students, it's not like, this is very like strange, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and I really think too, for me, one of my big picture observations is sometimes equity comes second. And so when I think about like what I want my 3-year goal to be, I want everyone's like I want equity and inclusion to be everyone's number one, because it's like the foundation, it's the plate of everything that we do. And so if we can really get, our community, our kids, our parents, um, our teachers to really see that it is this foundation, and that we should be viewing everything from this lens, that I feel like we could create that environment long term.
I
So
100% agree. Like,
Yeah.
that's something that me and my husband talk about all the time at home. Like, mentally healthy children are the ones that are going to be the most academically successful. So whatever we can do as a community and as the schools, like, work together to help kids, especially kids that are coming out of like pandemic, to really help them like learn about their feelings and learn all of those things. It's fantastic.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think our last big hurrah is to make sure we announce our quarterly parent meetings. So who would
Yeah,
like
so
to
our first one, I can't see the slide, of course, but I am gonna go by memory, is Thursday, May 11th, 6 o'clock to 7
Right.
o'clock
You're
at
all
Southeast.
Yeah.
And we're partnering with the Evergreen Park Library and the Center for Self-Actualization to look at, I think, family stressors, but also just kind of talk a little bit about resources within the community. And so we will have childcare and translation services available. And really, we would love to kind of just see anyone that's listening tonight. We'd love to see you on Thursday, May 11th at Southeast.
Yes, 6 o'clock. Be
6
there or be square, right, guys?
Exactly.
Well, I want to say thank you so much to each of you. I mean, your voice is super important. Nilda and Meg, you are my first parent guests, so you go down in the history of the books. So I'm so pleased to have you. And it's just about it's a process of continuous improvement. This is a journey. By no means are we doing any of this perfectly, right? But we're definitely in it to win it. One other big announcement too, that this was just board approved, that we have just posted for a DEI coordinator position, and that's a diversity, equity, and inclusion coordinator. I'm super thrilled to post for this position. I think it demonstrates the work that we have yet to do, and that it is a high priority for us. And I can't wait to really develop that role with my principal team, with my cabinet, with my community, and definitely have that person be a resource to all of our families as well. So for more information, this is like my tagline on our #WeConnect series. Please visit our website at do124.org. I have enjoyed having you all here tonight, and bye for now. Thank you so
Thanks for
much.
having us.
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, thank you.
Bye.